Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. Today we're going to be exploring a topic that I find absolutely fascinating, and that's the minds of animals. We're going way beyond that simple question of do animals feel pain,
hmm
and really try to understand, how they experience the world around them.
Yeah, it's a question that's captivated scientists and philosophers for centuries, really.
Oh, absolutely. And
Yeah,
there's no easy answers here.
right.
But that's what makes this deep dive so intriguing.
Exactly.
So we'll be looking at some pretty surprising examples like fish that use tools. Did you know that? Fish that use
It's
tools.
incredible, yeah.
Parrots that understand like same and different,
Mm.
and bees that grasp the concept of up.
Really makes you think, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. So to kick things off, let's talk about pain beyond humans.
Okay, sounds good.
I think a good place to start is with the concept of nociception.
Right.
So for our listeners, nociception is essentially the ability to detect potentially harmful stimuli, like a burn or a cut.
It's like a built-in alarm system warning you of danger.
Exactly, exactly. And it's present in a wide range of species.
Oh, yeah, even those with simpler nervous systems can have nociception.
But now, here's the key distinction. Nociception doesn't automatically equal pain, right?
Right.
Pain, as we experience it, involves emotional processing. And that's much harder to measure,
Yeah.
especially in creatures who can't, tell us what they're feeling.
Exactly. It's subjective.
Yeah.
It's their experience. We can't really know.
So how do researchers even begin to study something as complex as animal pain?
Well, one approach is something called argument by analogy.
Okay.
So we observe how an animal reacts to something, say an injury, and then we compare that to how we as humans might react in a similar situation.
So like if a dog yelps when you accidentally step on its paw,
Yeah,
you assume it's feeling pain because you would yelp too.
exactly. It's not a perfect method,
But
obviously,
of course.
but it's a starting point.
Yeah, yeah. Makes sense. So where does this lead us in terms of understanding, like, which animals feel pain?
Well, let's take fish, for example.
Okay, fish.
They do have nociceptors, these sensory receptors that detect harmful stimuli.
So they have that basic alarm system.
Right, and they show physiological responses to injury, like changes in breathing or heart rate, but they lack certain nerve fibers that are found in mammals, those that we associate with pain perception.
So does that mean they don't feel pain?
It's not so simple. The absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Fish might process pain differently. We just don't have the full picture yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can't just assume they experience things exactly the way we do.
Right. And there's some fascinating research suggesting that fish might be more aware of pain than we realize.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, some studies have shown that when given the choice, injured fish will actually choose food that contains painkillers.
Wow, so they're self-medicating.
It seems that way, which would suggest some level of pain awareness, wouldn't it?
That's incredible. It really challenges our assumptions, doesn't it?
It really does.
So it seems like there's still a lot we don't know about how fish experience pain.
Absolutely. It's a complex issue, and there's no easy answer. But the research is ongoing, and we're learning more all the time.
And what about other species? What about birds, for example? Do we see similar responses in them?
Yes, we do. Studies have shown that birds also exhibit pain-related behaviors. They, too, will choose painkillers when injured. And this brings up an important point.
Okay.
The whole debate around animal pain has shifted in recent decades.
In what way?
Well, instead of just asking, do animals feel pain?
Mm-hmm.
More and more research is focusing on understanding how they experience it and, crucially, on how we can minimize their suffering.
That's a big shift. So
Mm.
it's not just about proving or disproving pain, but about taking responsibility for our actions and how they might impact animals.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that animals are complex beings, worthy of our compassion and respect.
Well said. So we've talked about pain, but what about the bigger picture of intelligence and consciousness?
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting.
I bet. We often hear these amazing stories about animals displaying surprising intelligence.
Oh, absolutely. And those stories aren't just anecdotes. There's a growing body of scientific evidence to support them.
Can you give us some examples?
Of course. Let's start with chimpanzees, for instance. They've been observed using tools in very, very complex ways. Like, they don't just use a stick to fish for termites, they'll actually modify the stick, stripping off leaves to make it more effective.
Wow, so they're not just using tools, they're actually crafting them.
Exactly. That suggests a level of understanding and problem solving that goes way beyond simple trial and error.
That's amazing. And I remember reading about an African gray parrot named Alex, I think it was,
Oh, Alex, yeah.
who not only learned hundreds of words, but also seemed to, like, grasp abstract concepts.
Alex was truly exceptional. His abilities were, well, they were comparable to some primates, really.
That's incredible.
It shows that complex communication and abstract thought aren't limited to mammals.
So it's not just about primates then. What about other species? Are there any other examples of this kind of, like, higher level thinking?
Oh, there are plenty. Take the wrasse, a type of fish that uses rocks as anvils to crack open shellfish.
Fish using tools. That's incredible.
It is, and it shows that sophisticated tool use isn't limited to mammals.
So the more we learn, the more those old categories we've created start to break down.
Exactly, and that's really exciting.
It is. What about less obvious forms of intelligence, though, like the ability to categorize information? Is there evidence of that in animals?
Definitely. Pigeons, for example, they can categorize photos into human and non-human, even when the images vary quite a bit.
So they're not just memorizing specific images, they're understanding the underlying concept of human.
Right, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it.
It is. It seems like we're only just scratching the surface of what's going on in these animal brains.
We are. And it forces us to reconsider, what we think we know about intelligence and consciousness.
Are they truly unique to humans, or are we just one part of a much larger, much more complex spectrum?
Exactly. That's the big question, isn't it?
It is a big question. And before we try to tackle that one, I think it's time to move on to another fascinating aspect of animal minds: emotions.
Okay, let's do it.
We'll be right back after a short break.
Welcome back to our exploration of animal minds. Before the break, we were talking about some pretty amazing examples of animal intelligence. Now let's shift gears a bit and delve into the realm of animal emotions. How can scientists even begin to figure out if an animal is feeling something like, joy or sadness or even fear?
It's definitely tricky since, well, animals can't exactly tell us what they're feeling, but researchers have come up with some pretty clever ways to study this. And one really interesting area is the study of what's called cognitive bias in animals.
Cognitive bias, that sounds kind of complex. It is a bit, but think of it this way. If you're in a good mood, you're more likely to see see the glass as half full. You're more likely to interpret things in a positive light.
Yeah, I get that.
So this tendency to interpret information based on your current emotional state, that's cognitive bias. And research suggests that animals, they might show similar biases.
So how do they study this in animals?
Well, let's take rats, for example. Researchers, they trained rats to associate a specific sound with either a positive experience, like getting a treat, or a negative one, like a mild electric shock. Then they introduced a new sound, something ambiguous, something the rats hadn't heard before.
Okay, so a brand new sound. What happened?
Well, the rats who had mostly positive experiences, they tended to approach the speaker playing that new sound almost as if they were expecting a treat.
Oh, interesting.
But the rats who had mostly negative experiences, they were more likely to avoid it.
So their previous experiences, their mood, it kind of colored how they perceived this new unknown thing.
Right. Exactly. And that suggests that, their emotional state was influencing their behavior just like it can in humans.
That's fascinating. But what about those more complex emotions like grief or empathy? Is there any evidence of animals experiencing those?
There's a growing body of evidence that suggests that animals, they experience a much wider range of emotions than we once thought, many that we used to think were uniquely human. Like, there are countless reports of animals exhibiting behaviors that, well, they're consistent with grief, especially after losing a companion.
Yeah, like I've heard stories about elephants mourning their dead.
Elephants are a great example. They have such strong social bonds, and they've been observed mourning their dead for days, touching the remains, vocalizing, almost like they're expressing their distress.
It's both heartbreaking and kind of amazing to think about the depth of their emotional experience.
It is. And what's even more fascinating is the evidence suggesting that some animals, they might even experience empathy. that ability to understand and share the feelings of another. There are cases of, say, dogs seemingly comforting distressed humans or even other animals, even those that aren't related to them. It's like they can sense the emotional state of another being and respond with compassion.
It really makes you wonder just how much we still have to learn about what's going on inside those animal minds.
Absolutely. And this brings us to another really compelling aspect of consciousness, and that's attention.
Attention.
Yeah, think about it. Attention is that ability to focus on specific things in our environment while filtering out all the distractions, right?
Right.
It's crucial for learning, decision making, pretty much everything we do. And it's not just a human thing. Animals show some remarkable attentional abilities, too.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. Imagine a cat stalking a bird. That cat's entire focus is laser sharp on that bird, ignoring everything else around it. That intense focus, that's attention, and it's crucial for a successful hunt.
Yeah, that makes sense. But how does this all relate back to consciousness?
Well, a lot of scientists, they believe that attention is actually a key ingredient in conscious experience. It's the ability to selectively process information and direct our awareness to what matters most at any given moment. And as we've seen, animals, they demonstrate this ability in really amazing ways.
So the more we learn about animal attention, the closer we might get to understanding their conscious experience.
Exactly. And this understanding, it's led to some major shifts in how the scientific community views animal consciousness as a whole. You familiar with the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness?
Yeah, heard of it.
So back in 2012, a group of prominent neuroscientists, they got together at the University of Cambridge and signed this declaration, stating their belief that non-human animals, and this is a quote, have the neuroanatomical, neurochemical, and neurophysiological substrates of conscious states, along with the capacity to exhibit intentional behaviors.
Wow, that's a pretty big statement coming from a group of leading scientists.
It is. It's a significant step toward recognizing the complexity of animal minds. And it raises a lot of questions about how we treat animals in research, in food production, even in our everyday lives.
It's a lot to think about, that's for sure. So where do we go from here? What are some of the most pressing ethical questions we need to address regarding our interactions with other species?
Well, that's a topic for another deep dive, perhaps,
Yeah.
but it's definitely something worth exploring further.
It is. It is. This whole discussion has been really eye-opening.
It's a fascinating field, isn't it?
It really is. Thanks for joining us today and sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. Always happy to talk about animal minds.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this deep dive into the fascinating world of animal minds. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those questions coming. Welcome back to our deep dive into the minds of animals. Over these past two segments, we've really explored some incredible evidence suggesting that animals are far more complex than we often give them credit for.
Oh, absolutely. It's been a real eye-opener, hasn't it?
It really has. And it brings us to some pretty profound ethical questions.
Yeah, it does.
If we accept that animals can experience the world in ways that we're only, beginning to grasp, what responsibilities do we have towards them?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there are no easy answers. Different ethical frameworks offer different perspectives. Some argue that we should extend certain rights to animals based on their capacity for suffering.
Yeah, if they can feel pain and distress,
Yeah.
it seems like we have a moral obligation to protect them, right?
Absolutely. And then others focus more on promoting animal welfare within the systems we already have, like in agriculture and research.
So trying to minimize suffering in those areas.
Exactly. Things like supporting stricter regulations for factory farming or advocating for alternatives to animal testing.
So it's not just about whether animals deserve rights or not.
Right.
It's also about ensuring their well-being, regardless of your philosophical stance, right?
Exactly. Recognizing animal sentience, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to completely overhaul everything. But it does mean that we need to have a deeper, more thoughtful conversation about our relationship with other species.
It's about acknowledging that they're not just objects or commodities. They're living, feeling beings.
Exactly. And, it's interesting. This whole discussion really makes you think about what it means to be a moral being, right?
Yeah, it really does.
For so long, we humans have put ourselves at the top of some kind of hierarchy, assuming that our intelligence, our self-awareness, that's what made us special. But the more we learn about animal minds, the more that hierarchy kind of crumbles, doesn't it?
It does. It really challenges our assumptions about our place in the world. So where do we go from here? How do we, turn all of these insights into meaningful action?
Well, I think the first step is awareness, right?
Yeah.
The more people understand about animal sentience, the more they'll be able to make informed choices. It might mean, choosing products from companies with humane practices or supporting legislation that protects animals, or even just being more mindful of our interactions with animals in our everyday lives.
Yeah. It's a journey, isn't it?
It is. It's a journey of both individual and collective responsibility.
Well said. Well, this has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the minds of animals. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Deep Dive. Keep those questions coming, and we'll catch you next time.